we're going to look in these next few messages, we're going to look at how Jesus interacted with those who were so opposed to him. We're going to look at the time when he was put on trial and then crucified. And then we're going to look at when he rose again and how he interacted with people as there too. But in the stories that we're going to read today, we're going to see Jesus interact with those who wanted to get rid of him. Judas had decided to betray Jesus. The religious leaders had decided to condemn Jesus. And Pilate honestly could care less. He was just like, I just want this whole, whatever this is, to go away. You're annoying me. I'm a Roman, you're a Jew, get away. I don't care about you. I don't care about your so-called Messiah or not Messiah. I don't care. But what can we learn about ourselves from these stories? I think we identify with Judas sometimes. I think we can identify with the religious leaders sometimes. And I think we can identify with Pilate sometimes. We've all acted towards Jesus just like these different people did. We've all acted like a Judas. You know, when you have those moments where you can share the gospel or you can talk about your faith, you may turn away from that. I've done it. Maybe you have acted like the religious leaders where you think, well, I know who God is. I know what it takes to follow God. I don't need you, Jesus, to tell me how to follow him. And maybe we've been on Pilate and just been indifferent. Yeah, I don't care. Whatever. But the amazing part is that Jesus acts the same towards modern day Judases and Pharisees and Pilates as he did then. So how did Jesus act toward them? That's what we're going to look at today. How did Jesus act toward each of these people? You know, we're going to see how he acted towards Judas, and we're going to see how he acted towards those who came to arrest him, and then we're going to see when he's brought before Pilate, how does he act towards Pilate? So the first thing we'll look at is this question of, do you know who you're talking to? And in John 18, 1 through 11, we've been in Mark over the last few weeks. We looked at some in Luke as well. But we're going to switch over to John because John provides a little bit more details in this last week of Jesus' life, these last few days of Jesus' life, really, and how John offers a little more details of how Jesus got arrested and how he talked with certain people. So in John chapter 18, this is when Judas shows up. You know, Jesus had just been praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, and Judas shows up with this whole temple guard ready to arrest Jesus. So when he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side, there was a garden, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they said. Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. If you were looking for me, then let these men go." This happened so the words he would have spoken would be fulfilled. "I have not lost one of those you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" So this whole crew comes. This is after Jesus had the Last Supper with his disciples. Judas was at the Last Supper. In John's Gospel, it talks about how Jesus took off his outer robe, put a towel around his waist, and washed the disciples' feet, including Judas. And then Judas still chose to betray Jesus. And so Judas leads this whole temple guard to arrest Jesus. And when he gets there, Jesus looks at them and says, "What do you want?" Kind of a rhetorical question. Jesus knew who they were there for. He asked that question for them. Do you know who you want? Do you know who you've come to arrest? Do you know who you're talking to? Because notice how they answer this question. They say, Jesus of Nazareth. They're still seeing Jesus as this upstart rabbi, prophet from Nazareth. And what did Jesus' disciples say about Nazareth? Man, nothing good can come from Nazareth. They're not seeing Jesus for who he really is. That he is the Son of God. And notice how Jesus answers them. He says, I am he. And did you notice what happened when he said that? They all fell down. You know, Paul said that when Jesus returns, that every knee will bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Every knee and every tongue. Even those knees that stood defiant against Jesus, even those tongues that cursed Jesus, they will still bow the knee and confess that Jesus Christ is Lord because he is the conquering king. And Jesus, in this moment right here, was giving these people a little taste. Here's a little taste of what will happen in the future when I return, when I come back a second time. Everyone will bow. Because you didn't come to arrest Jesus of Nazareth. You came to arrest Jesus, the Son of God. You came to arrest God himself. You see, Judas, I think Judas at some point, when he started following Jesus, I think he actually believed that Jesus was the Messiah. But it was the Messiah that Judas pictured. The one who would ride into Rome and conquer them. And somewhere along the way, when Jesus started talking about how the Son of Man would be handed over and crucified, Judas started to question this and saying, I don't know about this now. This is not, I think maybe Judas had some zealot tendencies. The zealots were those, like Peter just showed, pull out the sword, let's fight. We will usher in God's kingdom with force. And I think Judas maybe had a little zealot tendencies about him. He's like, now let's take this by force. I'm sick of these Romans. I'm sick of living under their laws. We need to be a great nation again like we once were under King David and King Solomon. Let's be that again. And then when Jesus started talking about how he would bow to the Romans, Son of Man will be handed over and crucified. Judas was like, no, this is not the Messiah. And I think that's why he betrayed him. Unfortunately, not everyone believed that Jesus was the Son of God. But that wasn't going to stop Jesus from letting people know the truth. See, it's not by accident that Jesus asked these questions to the temple guard. It's not a coincidence that they fell down either. The problem was that Judas, the guards, and maybe even some of the disciples, because we can't necessarily exclude them either, because if you look at the disciples' history with Jesus, they really struggled with their faith. They really struggled believing that Jesus was who he said he was. Remember the story of the storm when they wake him up? And he tells the storm to be quiet, be still. And they all ask themselves, who is this? Who is this can talk to the storms and the waves and make them stop? Who is this? I think the problem was that they were casually approaching Jesus without thinking who they actually were approaching. They were not just approaching a prophet or some new dynamic teacher. They were approaching God himself. The audacity to think that they could come with weapons and torches and arrest God himself. People today take for granted who Jesus really is. We make him out to be our casual friend or treat him like a mere acquaintance. We go to him when we need him. We don't offer him our worship. We just say, you know what, God, I'm going to put you on the shelf, and when I need you, I'll come get you. I'll dust you off first. I'll dust you off, when I need you, and then I'll talk to you, and then you can help me out here, right? That's how we're going to do this. This is the relationship this is the agreement here. Let's sign this contract. I'll sign it here, and you sign it there, and we're all good. Sometimes we treat him like that rich uncle that we only talk to when we need some money or help with something. I didn't have a rich uncle. I wish I did. Sometimes we even treat Jesus like he is beneath us. We tell him what to do. You do what I say, Jesus. This is what I want. So you're going to do it. You know, sometimes we treat Jesus like we're Veruca Salt. Remember from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the spoiled little girl? Daddy, you give me this. Daddy, you give me that. You give me this now. I want it now, now, now. Do it now. But what we should be doing is bowing to him in full surrender. Because he is so far above us. Jesus is loving and kind, but he is also God too. He is the holy and the righteous one. In Hebrews chapter 7, verse 26, this is what the author of Hebrews writes. This is what he writes about Jesus. Chapter 7, verse 26. Such a high priest truly meets our need. One who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. He is exalted above the heavens. You know what the heavens were to the ancient people? Well, there were three. There were three types of heavens. The first heaven was the blue sky. The second heaven was where the stars and the universe and the galaxies were. The third heaven is where God is. Do you know how big the universe is? It's ginormous. Nobody has been able to even measure it. Scientists can kind of estimate maybe how big it is, but they even say it's still expanding. And God is above that. And the author of Hebrews says he is exalted above the heavens. And when the author of Hebrews, when his readers would read that, they understood that God is so far above the blue sky and he's so far above the stars in the universe. That's how big God is. And that's where Jesus is. Because he's God too. He is the great I am, exalted above the heavens. In Hebrews chapter 2, this is what, in verses 7 through 8, this is what the author of Hebrews says about Jesus here. It says, you made him a little lower than the angels. You crowned him with glory and honor and put everything under his feet. God left nothing that is not subject to him. Yet at present, we do not see everything subject to him. God put Jesus at his right hand. Because of what the sacrifice Jesus made on the cross, because of what Jesus did, God exalted him to the right hand and put everything under his feet. That's why when Jesus returns, that's why I go back to Paul, when Paul says, every knee will bow and every tongue confess, because guess what? We're under Jesus whether we like it or not. Jesus is our King whether we like it or not, and whether we acknowledge him or not. See, Jesus' God, his divine status, his godhood, his role as king, his position as king, is not dependent on whether we believe that or not. He's God and king, regardless of whether we believe it or not. And one day, those who don't believe it will certainly believe it, because seeing will definitely be believing. Because Scripture tells us at the trumpet blast, the bridegroom will come to get his bride. And he's going to return. And everybody's going to see it. You see, when we approach Jesus, we're approaching the one who is exalted in the highest place, and everything is subject to him. He is the great I am, who has always existed. He is the one who is greatly to be praised and worthy of our worship. We don't approach Jesus casually and standing upright. We approach Jesus in full surrender with our hearts bowed to him. And when we tell others about Jesus, we can't just tell them that he is our BFF forever. That he is our God and King forever. One more thing to notice in this account before we move on is how Peter treats this new threat and how Jesus does. Two very different reactions. Peter pulls out the sword and he cuts off the ear of the servant of the high priest, which that's a huge deal. And this is the servant of the high priest. Peter could be executed for that and put in prison or done something. And then Jesus, I think part of this was protecting Peter. But Jesus looks at Peter, rebukes him, and says, put the sword away. That's not how we'll do things. Because remember, Peter already tried to stop Jesus once. Remember, Jesus, after Peter said, you're the Christ, the Son of God. And then Jesus talked about how he's going to be handed over and crucified. And then Peter took him aside. Again, that's a bold move right there. Peter takes him aside and says, no, you won't do that. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. And the same thing here. Peter takes out the sword. Let's fight. Let's defend Jesus. Let's fight for the kingdom. And Jesus says, you put your sword away because this is the Father's will. I need to drink this cup. I need to get to that cross. Because what Peter and the disciples didn't quite understand yet. They didn't understand that the Messiah had to suffer. They didn't realize who they were talking to still. So that we know who we're talking to. We're talking to the holy and righteous God who demands surrender, but also shows loving kindness to his enemies. That's the Jesus we need to preach about. That's the Jesus the world needs. In John 18, going back to John 19 through 23, this is after Jesus is arrested. Jesus is taken in this mock trial with the religious leaders. It happens at night, in the middle of the night, because if they did it during the day, they would draw some unwanted attention from the Romans. So they wanted to make sure they could get this done, so then they could go to Pilate and say, hey, we got some charges against this guy, and we want to get rid of him. In John chapter 18, this is how Jesus talks to the religious leaders, right? Interacts with them. Let me start at verse 19. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. I have spoken openly to the world, Jesus replied. I always taught in synagogues or at the temple where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said. When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. Is this the way you answer the high priest? He demanded. The author of Hebrews calls Jesus the greater high priest. So who's better? If I said something wrong, Jesus replied, testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me? Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. They slapped Jesus. And Jesus said, what did I say? If it's wrong, I'll apologize. But I'm pretty sure I said the truth. But notice how Jesus still loved his enemies. He didn't strike back. Could he have called down legions of angels to destroy all of them right then and there? Absolutely. He could have said, you know what, Dad, I'm done. Bring down, rain the fire. Rain the fire from heaven. We're done. But he didn't. He took the slap in the face. But he didn't shy from the truth. He said, if what I spoke is true, then why did you hit me? Very calmly. Didn't yell back. We live in such a world where our reaction is to yell back. That's what everybody's doing now. It's yell back. The religious leaders didn't know who they were talking to, but that didn't stop Jesus from loving them. When people are going to yell at us or get angry at us because we speak truth, they're not yelling at us. They're not rejecting us. They're rejecting Jesus. And guess what? Jesus is big enough to take it. He's a big boy. He's been around for a long time. He can take it. We don't need to be like Peter and pull out the sword and start fighting, start swinging and cut out people's ears. We'll go to jail for that. That's not right. That's wrong. Jesus can take it. It's because people don't realize who they're yelling against, who they're talking to. Just like these people, just like Judas and his temple guard and these religious leaders didn't understand who they were talking to. So where do we go from there? Where do we go from here? How do we do this? What's the second thing we'll look at today is there's a better force. There's a better force that we can use. Going to John 18, going back there, skipping down to verse 33, and then we're going to read into chapter 19. This is when Jesus was brought before Pilate. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" You can see how much Pilate cares about this. He's like, "Am I a Jew?" Just answer the question. I don't want to deal with you. Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders, but now my kingdom is from another place." I read that, I almost picture like the angels just ready. They're waiting. He's not talking about disciples when he says servants. He's talking about the legions and legions and legions of angels that have swords drawn. Like we know that story of Elisha, when the whole army came to get Elisha, and his servant is there, and he's like, "Elisha, what the heck are we going to do? Look at this army." And he's like, "Oh, we got a bigger one." And the servant's like, "What are you talking about?" And then Elisha prays right there and says, "May his eyes be open, God." And then the servant's eyes are open to see thousands upon thousands of angels ready to strike. When Jesus says, "My kingdom is not from this place, and I have servants that are ready," they could prevent my arrest, yes. It's those thousands upon thousands upon thousands of angels at the ready. All Jesus had to say was go. But he chose not to, because Jesus was choosing a better force. Verse 37, "You are a king then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came to this world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." Verse 38, "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. With this, he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him. But it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews?" They shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. Chapter 19, "Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him again and again, saying, 'Hail, King of the Jews!' And they slapped him in the face." This was after the Roman flogging. Roman floggings lasted until the Romans got tired. The Jews could only do it 39 times. Because they said the 40th time to kill somebody, and they couldn't do that. The Romans did not abide by such rules. They could do it as many times as they felt like it. Once more, Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify! Crucify!" But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." The Jewish leaders insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law, he must die because he claimed to be the Son of God." When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid and went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus, but Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." See, Jesus was finally brought before Pilate. And notice how this conversation goes. Jesus kind of treats Pilate a little bit differently than the Pharisees, religious leaders. Because Pilate has an issue with truth. Pilate thinks he's in charge. Pilate thinks Rome's in charge. And Jesus' answers to Pilate are really like, without saying, he's going, you realize you're not in charge, right? You realize you have no power over me. It's just the power that was granted you. I'm actually submitting to your power by choice. You see, Rome thought in terms of force. They were the steamroller. We're going to steamroll over everyone, and they will submit to us because we're stronger, because we're more powerful. And Jesus was trying to get Pilate to see there is a better force out there. There's a better force. Jesus wanted Pilate to know who had the real authority. See, Pilate's definition of power was the world's definition of power. Power came to those who were stronger, survival of the fittest. Power came to those who took it by force. But true power comes to the humble. True power comes to those who are weak. True power comes to those who do not take it by force. In Matthew 5:38-42, this is what Jesus says in his Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus is literally living out the words. 38-42 of chapter 5 says this. You have heard it said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other also. Jesus got slapped twice in these stories we read today. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. See, true power does not come through force, but through love. Turning the other cheek is about loving people, not being a doormat. Jesus was not being weak for weakness' sake. He was being weak for love's sake. Because he loved Pilate. He did. He loved him deeply. He wanted Pilate to understand where he was coming from. He wanted Pilate to see Jesus for who he really was. We can't force people to come to Jesus, just like Jesus didn't force people to come to him. He spoke to Pilate in a way that Pilate would understand, so that maybe the light switch would go on. Jesus willfully submitted to Pilate's authority so that he could show not only Pilate and Rome, and not only the Jews, but also the entire world and everyone who would read these stories after this. He wanted to show them there's a better way. In 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 8. This is Peter's letter, and this is after Peter has been changed by the Holy Spirit, and Peter gets it now. 1 Peter 4:8. Listen to Peter's words and compare what we know about Peter, what we just read, when he pulled out the sword and cut off that ear. This is a changed man at this point. 1 Peter 4:8. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins.